All right, folks, welcome back again to the SNEED-CAST. This will be coming out here at the beginning of 2025. We are recording in December 2024, a month here since the election, to talk a little bit about the 2025 landscape for cannabis and hemp industry, specifically here in Texas, as well as just nationwide, what that kind of landscape looks like. And joining us to have this discussion is a renowned hemp and cannabis attorney and lobbyist from here, the great state of Texas, Chelsei Spencer. Got her law degree from the University of Miami School of Law, go Canes. Founding partner at Ritter Spence Chang in Addison, Texas. Licensed to practice in Florida and Texas. Practices within the realm of medical marijuana, CBD, kratom, and hemp spaces, focusing on issues such as intellectual property, business, and compliance issues, and also frequently writes, speaks, and presents on issues affecting these industries across the U.S., and has also been featured in Forbes and other publications for her work in the cannabis space. So, Chelsei, thank you so much for making time for us. I'm sure you are looking at a very busy spring leading into the 2025 Texas legislative session, so we do appreciate your time, especially here during the holiday season as well.
Of course, happy to be here.
I have Quentin, our traditional executive producer, joining us here on this side of the camera, and Alexa sitting behind the camera taking notes, preparing for all of our outreach after the fact. So other than that, like and subscribe to the podcast. Getting more and more interesting guests on to talk about everything that affects anything in that packaging space that you guys are all in, including specific industries as well. So we'll dive right in. One of my first questions I always like to ask, regardless of what the topic is or who our guest is just what initially drew you to this cannabis and hemp space, which is obviously over the last decade has just had a crazy journey, both nationally and statewide. So just, I'm always kind of curious, what is it that kind of got you into the space? What is it you find that kind of drives your passion and motivations within some of the work you do?
Yeah, I've been so privileged to watch this industry expand. I've particularly been in cannabis for over 10 years. I'm licensed in Florida as well, and was able to watch it grow from its inception here in Texas, which couldn't even be more exciting for me to look at where we are today. And frankly, I couldn't even envision we'd be where we are today, for example, within beverages within the 6 months they've been on shelves here. So I think it was 2013 or 2014, had a large tobacco client. They do a lot of nicotine, cigarettes and cigars, things like that. And they came to me and they said, we need to register this trademark for CBD. And like the entire rest of the country back in 2013, I said, what the hell is CBD? So at that point, to get a trademark through the USPTO that included a cannabinoid was like a roller coaster. The office was changing its mind. Some marks could get through. You really had to have an intimate knowledge of what was going on at the federal level, which at that point was very preliminary. We were coming into the time with the 2014 Farm Bill, a subsequent challenge within the Ninth Circuit to that, the USPTO taking the stance that it didn't permit for interstate commerce. And it really just grew from there. I started to learn more about the plant. And I say I have a really non traditional path here. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher. And now at Thanksgivings, we're talking about the benefits of medical cannabis at the table. I actually just had someone in my family was prescribed medical cannabis. So it's been a wonderful 10
Love it.
years and love what I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that too. Like that changing dialogue around the space is really just for me. I'll be careful not to proselytize my own personal opinions, but I love
No, I
hearing
love
that,
it. No, I
being able
love
to
it.
having those discussions, opening people's minds and eyes, and seeing through all the myths and lies and propaganda that have been told about this, what I term a miracle plant over the last
Yeah.
several decades.
I grew up in the
So
90s with the anytime I speak publicly, I always say, my first goal here is to educate. So you're going to have to listen to me proselytize for about 10 minutes. And I usually go through, I grew up in the generation with the Saturday morning. This is your brain. This is your brain on pot. And it
yep.
shows the girl like,
The
oh
old
my God.
egg smashing with the frying pan video.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, those guys. So funnily enough, those commercials were funded by the United States alcohol industry. And so I have a huge spiel where I go back through because you really can't blame people for what is ignorance is different than stupidity. And when you grew up with a regime that was constantly telling you how dangerous this drug was, that's a little bit different than willful stupidity. I mean, a lot of people are shocked to find out our government lies sometimes. Long story short, whenever I speak, I go through the whole. There's a quote from Nixon's foreign policy advisor where he says, "Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." But yeah, I'd love to hear that you're big on education because that's huge for me. I find that when people either watch a live dosage event, notice immediate efficacy, look at some of the medical studies, or hear about the vast history of our United States government in hiding the ball in what cannabis really is and what it is capable of, that minds get changed.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm 30, so I grew up in the dare world, in elementary school and middle school. So we were hit over the head with some crazy propaganda. So I definitely echo those same thoughts.
Was that
And then
Scruff McGruff? I gotta ask.
yeah, it was Scruff
I
McGruff.
remember
What's funny now is that
Wasn't it?
yeah, it was. But they also had police officers come through the schools and explain the issues of drunk driving, smoking cigarettes, but then also they were heavy on anti-weed stuff, of course. And now it's funny now. I mean, those Dare shirts are now worn ironically.
Yeah, my son, for one, wears it ironically.
And so it's just kind of one of those funny things of they tried one thing and it just went the complete opposite way. But yeah, so my question is, I guess starting off, like, how did this farm bill happen? Like, what was the original intent of it? And how did this loophole get in there? Because it seems like it was a fairly almost specific loophole kind of designed to exploit it in this way. Like, does that make sense?
It was not. So the 2014 Farm Bill was passed with the intention for both agrarian use, but also sale and commerce. And we don't even have to guess about that. There's an amicus brief that was filed in the Ninth Circuit in that case that I was discussing. We call them Hemp 1, 2, and 3. But all of the main sponsors and drafters of the bill, along with about 28 other senators, joined. And in that amicus brief, they very clearly stated that no, we actually did intend for these products to be sold in interstate commerce. Did Congress envision a regime where high potency Delta 9 products would be traveling back and forth in interstate commerce? Absolutely not. I think the
Clever
industry,
scientists, clever scientists.
clever scientists and clever linguists, because I think a lot of people forget that both the 2014 and 2018 Farm Bill, the term hemp is predicated by and really confined by the words the plant cannabis sativa L. So when they're talking about the 0.3% threshold, they're only talking about the plant material within the product. Ideally, you were divorcing everything else off. That's obviously not how it has played out in practice. And we're starting to see the impact on that at the individual state levels. For example, with California coming out of left field and banning all hemp derived cannabinoids within the state.
So that's a great segue because I kind of like it took me a while over the last 6 to 12 months. We've had plenty of internal debates here as a consumer. As these new THCA and hemp-derived THC products were coming on the market here in Texas, like trying to understand and differentiate and what the difference is and everything else. But then to see what California just did here with the ban on hemp-derived THC, which just like to me, I'm just pulling my hair out. It's now you have hemp interests fighting cannabis, traditional quote-unquote cannabis interests fighting each other, and I've seen a lot of the impacts on businesses, hemp businesses in California that are trying to establish last-minute alternatives outside the state, et cetera. So I don't know. I'd love to hear your take from a legal perspective, and also knowing the competing interests within the lobbying world and whatnot of hemp and cannabis, kind of what led to the California ban. And I mean, I have my own cynical and skeptical points of view from the outside, but I would love to kind of hear from your perspective and get more insight on what happened there. And
Yeah. I know where you're going with that, and it's this big cannabis hemp war, which honestly in most states I find is a really false dichotomy and extremely false narrative. In California, I actually, that is the one exception I will say that I do believe um, there was interest both in recreational and medicinal and saving those markets. They have some additional problems there, but the hemp industry needs to stop being aghast at when regulations come down or when things don't go the way that you would suppose they would, that somebody regulates instead of banning it all. Because we are starting to see a rise in what I call bad faith actors. And they're very few and far between. Most of the people out there are striving to do the right thing. They have the right licensure. They care about the products that are going into people's bodies. But we have seen adverse incident reporting go up in nearly every state. You can watch, particularly here in Texas, the rise of high potency Delta 9. And you can see cannabinoid dosage incidents in the 0 to 5 age range, which is incredibly concerning. Go this, just exactly like this. You see a pretty flat line graph, and then it increases within uh, at least a base. I think the base meeting we had an economist look at it, it was about 130 something percent, just a straight upwards trend. And that is because when you don't regulate, for example, here in Texas, we have no child resistant or tamper resistant packaging requirements. So there are people who are putting gummies in, paper bags and sending them out the door. If you put a gummy or a cereal bar anywhere within your home and you have a toddler, and I have a toddler, they are fully incapable of saying, well, that might be a fairly dangerous thing for me to eat. And they're eating them and ended up hospitalized. We had a pediatrician testifying on the Senate floor about intubating a 2-year-old. Now, are those the exceptions and the extremes? Yes. But what people need to understand is that is what the state legislatures hear. And I know because I'm in the room when these conversations go down. So they don't hear about the perfectly functioning company that's never had an adverse event, that is voluntarily CR certifying, that isn't outselling a 500 milligram gummy. What the legislature hears is they hear from mothers of sons who have suffered from events of psychosis. They hear from pediatricians. The pediatricians are out in droves right now. You saw pediatricians testify at the May hearing in Texas, and we saw pediatricians testify in the October hearing here in Texas. They're concerned, and they're not pulling it out of nowhere. They're looking at statistical data, and they're going on their own personal events. Like I said, the one testified about personally intubating a 2-year-old in an emergency room. That's a real problem. So, what happened in
Curious,
California?
I'm curious on that. But on that, I understand the precipitous increase in child incidents are obviously concerning. But with statistics, percentage increases always look really dramatic. But I'm just in terms of numbers, sheer numbers of incidents. Are we talking in the hundreds, thousands?
Okay.
Thousands. All of this data is publicly available via the Department of State Health and Human Services. But your point being, even if it's only 2 to 3, and this is
Right. Yeah.
thousands statewide, that's what our legislators see. So same thing in California. They see the worst of the worst. They're showed things like diamond shrooms, which right now there's an FDA investigation as to whether that actually killed 2 people. So we get very reactive governance, which is
Right.
exactly what happened in California. That came out with a complete ban, which frankly absolutely shocked me. Um,
I'm still confused because what makes hemp-derived THC more dangerous than traditional cannabis-derived THC? That to me is the irony that that confuses me. But
according to the states, it is the level of testing and oversight that the cannabis regime has. Um, so let's take Texas here, for example. Something I really aim to correct in this legislative session, but it's oft repeated by our hemp industry is, well, medical is not tested here. That's an absolute lie. We actually have a product approval process for medical cannabis here in Texas. They have in self-testing where they have to test within their own laboratory, and then the Department of Public Safety actually sends it to an analytical lab for testing. So it's often triple tested here in Texas. So the argument against the hemp industry is they are not subjected to as intensive of testing, which, frankly, you can push back against by saying, well, here, for example, here in Texas, we actually do have Delta 9 potency. We have full cannabinoid potency profile testing. The problem is our regulations are a little bit lax. They say, if the product needs it, test for microorganisms and different things like E. coli. Nobody's doing that in food products, and they should be. But it's also on our department for not regulating robust regulations. And so what the senators are also shown is, hey, here's what's clearly a demonstrated fake COA, but the department can't do anything about it because nothing in the regs say that dishes should automatically go and independently validate. What happens when there's a toss up between those? You get a letter and it says, here's your cited observations, clear these. So I would be very well pleased. I'm obviously against a full and total ban here in Texas. If we're going to say that we're state of limited governance, which I often find is a joke.
Thank you.
in
Okay,
Texas.
you said it. You said it, not me, right? I believe in a traditional conservative value is one of personal responsibility. So there's a side of my brain that kind of leans heavily on that. Are we a state of personal responsibility and freedom, or are we not?
We really are not in practice here.
But that's what we sell, isn't it?
It is. I couldn't agree with you more that it's absolutely what we sell. But to tell people how high of a priority this is for Lieutenant Governor, I've worked with the legislature for 7+ years at this point. Helped with get most of our bills passed. Have already written 7 bills for this session. There's a lot coming in pre-filing. SB3, obviously from Perry's office, but um, while there is a ban bill that will absolutely be introduced, there are bills in process that are going to attempt to walk some of this back. But almost for the first time, I am very hesitant to give my client. I never give my clients any sort of guarantee, but I can usually tell them, yeah, you'll be fine coming out of the session. Nothing's going to change. I have never seen the lieutenant governor so personally invested in a cannabis issue. I mean, usually you can't even get him to take a meeting with anybody related. When I say cannabis, I mean both hemp and cannabis. Um, he has numerous times, both in private and in public, now reiterated that this is within the top 5 points on his legislative agenda. And when the lieutenant governor says he's going to do something, historically, it gets done. I mean, that being they've tried school vouchers for like 6 years now, and he's confident he's getting that done. But this situation is a little bit scary to me because he knows he needs the House. He's playing. He's playing chess. He's already there. He knows what he needs to get it done.
Is there with an administration, like a state administration, seemingly like you're saying this is like a top 5 issue. He is dyed in the wool on this. Is there any pro-business play? Is there any?
That was kind of because we have you see all these big businesses, Specs, Total Wine,
and some really traditionally
reputable businesses, right? That are you feel like they've got some investments and some interest here that we talked, like I mentioned before we started recording or with speaking to Joel Canada at Buffalo Bayou Hemp and Eighth Wonder. They seem fairly confident. Or at least he was a couple months ago. This was before Dan Patrick made these recent statements.
Yeah, I was going to say that Joel spoke before the statements coming out positive.
They're heavily invested in this space. I mean, if I'm sitting there in any of their management meetings or leadership meetings, I'm pretty worried at some of my investments here. But it kind of gave me the warm and fuzzies talking to him, like with these big names behind it, that hopefully that some of these big names have some influence or can at least, like you said, get some meetings and talk some sense.
Hate to burst your bubble. Hate to burst your absolute bubble here. But number one, they're already there. They've been there at least since beverage was added on the interim charge in October. So our large interests are definitely participating. For anyone in the state of Texas, you can find out who represents anyone as a lobbyist. That information is publicly available. You can simply search. As a lobbyist in Texas, you have to register. I'm not a lobbyist.
Excuse me. I should correct the intro I did then.
That's why I made sure to put that out there, because I help on the language on the bills. I don't advocate for a particular position when I'm speaking with the senator's office. They come to me and say, write this, and I'm all right. But all of those interests are already at the table. This is not about money. Texas has a surplus of like what, 80 something billion dollars at this point. He could care less if he kicks you out across the state. And people say, well, how can that be? And I say, well, he already did it. Our smokable manufacturers. I personally had clients who had to spend millions of dollars to move 2 minutes over the border to Oklahoma when the Supreme Court case was lost on the manufacturing and processing side, preserved it on retail. They've done it before. They don't care about the numbers. I do think there is a scintilla of hope. I think our best case scenario coming out of this session is we preserve beverage, which is something very near and dear to my heart. The only chance of preserving beverage is that it moves under the purview of TABC and it moves into the alcoholic beverage code. In fact, one of the bills I wrote did that. I think it established a new category called infused beverage and moved it within the purviews of the alcoholic beverage code as chapter 74 or 75, something like that, and then basically regulated it as pretty much akin to a malt liquor. It would be taxed as an alcoholic beverage, move within the alcoholic beverage streams. And I had really, really high hopes for that. law. There was input from mass retail into that bill. That being said, there is almost an internal disputing faction right now within alcohol. There's the guys who are super on board, who look at the outstanding growth numbers within this category. And I do mean
Mhm.
outstanding. They've never seen anything like this and want to keep it. But then there are others like the Craft Brewers Association where their membership is pretty split. A lot of them are in favor of it because, as I'm sure you know, alcohol's down 30 to 40% across the board, and craft breweries are hurting almost more than anyone. So,
Yep, empty
a
tap
lot of them
lines.
yeah, and a lot of them are figuring out they can convert to THC beverages, and it becomes quite lucrative. Others are, I don't want to say stuck in their ways, but they're very reticent to enact that change. So they're very against THC beverage because they view it as a direct threat. They think that it is the reason that alcohol is down, and which truly it is not. But that is their opinion. So we also have a dearth of distributors who are at the table. Out of the top 5 nationwide distributors, only one is actively distributing hemp beverages. Another's getting ready. But when you try to get some of them involved in session, they're very hesitant to do so because they're scared about their federal TTB licensure, which my response is always TTBs. Number one, I've personally communicated with them. They've said as long as the agency, I've got it in writing from one of the reps, as long as you're not combining with alcohol, there's no regulatory purview over that substance, period. Theirs is limited to alcoholic beverages. Second, the FDA issue is why these distributors are staying out, because they're saying if I distribute, I'm violating federal law because technically this product is illegal, and I'm scared
Right.
they're going to pull my TTB license. But my response is always, you're clearly interested in this. So many are taking steps behind the scenes so that they're ready at the minute the FDA issue is fixed. There's nothing to stop you from advocating. The government
Right.
can't pull your license from showing up and taking a position on a bill, but for some reason, I am just having the worst time um, getting what I would call big alcohol to come to the table here in Texas. And if any of them are out there listening, they've probably spoken to me. I've spoken to their lobbyists, and I reiterate that call because I think until about, I would even say when did he release that? Like last Wednesday night. Yeah, I think until then people didn't realize this was a real shot. There is a real shot of this happening. I think people just thought he was bloviating and maybe put it on his list, but this is now 4 times publicly that he has said no. This is incredibly important. I'm putting it on interim charge. I'm putting it on my second interim charge. I'm releasing a special statement. Do you know how important this bill is going to be? When people, if you don't work with the legislature, this might not be something you understand, but you need to look at the bill number 3. That means it is the 3rd Senate bill in priority. 1 and 2, I'm going to assume, is school voucher and probably property tax. We're coming in at 3. He is gunning for the hemp industry this session. And he followed that up. I nearly fell out of my chair because I was walking on a stage at MJ BizCon, and somebody sent me a tweet. He had tweeted saying, obviously he if people think he cares about the blowback, he could care less. But he was obviously getting a lot of it because he tweeted saying something like, "Don't worry, we're going to preserve access to teacup," which blew my mind because he hates that program too. He's not remotely a fan of medical cannabis. If he had his way, all THC would be gone in the state of Texas. But that's how serious he is about this. And people always, the number one question I get is like, what can I do? What can I do as an individual? The Senate is gone. You're wasting your time if you're scheduling meetings, talking with your senator. They're beholden solely to Dan Patrick. He controls what makes it to the floor. Your best bet as an individual, contact your state representative. Your state representative is where the fight is going to be. If Patrick gets the House, there will be a ban. It will be signed into law. A second thing is the more people that can band together to hire a competent lobbyist, the better, because we need more voices up there urging reasonable regulations instead of banning everything.
This episode of the SNEED-CAST is brought to you by the SNEED-JET Titan tabletop printer. The Titan is perfect for businesses making the leap from manual to semi-automated coding, with its horizontal traversing printhead capable of producing crisp, high-quality prints up to 12.7 millimeters in height. With an intuitive design, simply load your ink cartridge, create or upload your message, position your product, and activate the motor. Porting both solvent and water-based inks in a variety of colors like black, white, red, blue, and even UV, the SNEED-CAST Titan accommodates a wide range of surfaces from aluminum cans and plastic bottle caps to food packaging and ceramic items. Upgrade your coding operations today with the versatile and reliable SNEED-CAST Titan tabletop printer.
So curious, the other thing though, like, and I know he hasn't, it's a little mixed, but like, it's not necessarily unison within the GOP in Texas. You know, you've had folks like Ag Commissioner Sid Miller come out. You know, he's obviously very much in favor of the medical program and everything else. So, you know, it's not like there's full unison within the GOP and within party. I know it all depends on who's in the Senate and who sits in the House, right? But, you know, there is that faction within the GOP that has come out as being pro-cannabis and pro-hemp and see the business benefits. You know, I guess we're all just clinging to hoping that their voices win out within their inter-party debates and whatnot. But
Unfortunately, he doesn't get a voice.
yeah, I know, but influence or but hopefully can try to talk some sense into the House or anybody.
What somebody needs to do, and if somebody's out there listening, that has funds. It was done about 4 years ago, so now the study is dated. But there was a big study done, and it actually showed that Republicans supported medical cannabis too. I mean, that's a given. Sometimes I think our leadership is very disconnected from that figure. So I really am hoping to see like one of our think tanks conduct another statewide poll and poll conservatives, because I guarantee you the number has gone up exponentially since the last time they ran the statewide numbers. That may be the only thing that would influence him at this point, is if he realized that his voting base and the base to which he's beholden to is actually in favor of this.
This is kind of an esoteric question, so I do apologize, but like Oklahoma has fully legalized weed and they have medical weed. Oklahoma ideologically in my mind is not too different as far as GOP goes from Texas. And I know this is a difficult question. What about it? Is it just Dan Patrick, this is just his hobby horse and this is what it is and we're in his state and so deal with it?
First, you're stabbing me in the heart. Do you know how many Oklahoma jokes I have to make every time I speak? And, like somebody will say, oh, I'm from Oklahoma. And I'll say, oh, I'm sorry. And then here I am in a state that we don't even have. We had like 1% cap and only for childhood epilepsy for the longest time. So, yeah, huge stain on our face here. We almost out conservative Idaho for a long time. Like it's absolutely insane to me. And I do understand it. Yes, it is leadership here. They are very anti-cannabis. Efforts have been made to change that perception, but I think like even authorized medical patients within the teacup program face a stigma at that level from the uses. So yeah, just super super anti-cannabis here in the state of Texas. And
So I mean, go ahead, Chelsea.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna. I mean, kind of like the question I have on our outline here. I mean, I kind of already know the answer, but the 2025 state landscape obviously is not looking a little doom and gloom at the moment. Not a lot of positives there. But to kind of switch a little bit, because we do have customers across the country, not just here in Texas. Federally speaking, there's some of these Trump administration nominees, and I know there's differing opinions within them as well, but some rather vocal and outspoken folks within his circle in terms of federal legalization. And I don't know how much you get involved there on the federal level and whatnot. I know you practice in multiple states, but over the next 4 years within the Trump administration, what are your thoughts here initially, or kind of what that looks like? Because I know that's a whole nother ball game in terms of what does the regulation look like? Are we talking about rescheduling? And then does that fall under the FDA, which is a whole nother nightmare? So a lot to unpack there, but just kind of at a 30,000 foot level, what is kind of your thoughts what the next 4 years are going to look like in terms of potential federal legalization or standardization or anything along those lines?
We're still going to be within a bifurcated regime, so let's split them for the moment. On the hemp side, I do believe that 5 years later, And at that point, it will be 7 years later. We will finally see resolution to the FDA issue. For any listeners who may not be aware, on the date that the 2018 Farm Bill was signed by President Trump, immediately on the same day, then acting Commissioner Scott Gottlieb came out with an opinion letter on the FDA website stating that the inclusion of CBD and THC into a food, drug, beverage, or cosmetic made the product adulterated or misbranded within interstate commerce. So any THC or CBD product that goes into your mouth, even some topicals, if they make health claims, the United States government currently considers illegal. Finally, we're going to get a fix to that. And right now, the leading proposition on that is the Cannabinoid Safety and Regulation Act, which is introduced by Ron Wyden out of Oregon. I have high hopes for that bill. It's going to kill a lot of what I termed those bad actors within the industry because, for example, if we go into a realm where CBD and or THC from hemp is classified as a dietary supplement, own label distributors and holders, white labelers, then are responsible for complying with the entire onus of CGMP regulations, which is they're pretty serious. On the cannabis side, I 100% believe we'll end up with rescheduling into Schedule 3, which will qualify cannabis for standard pharmaceutical use. Now, is this good for the industry? I think a lot of people laud the move into Schedule 3 without realizing what that will entail. We don't yet know, how states are going to react. When it's moved into, when any drug is scheduled federally, every state has sort of a trigger period that will allow their drug commissioner or their state health agency, whomever's in charge of it, to look at what the federal government did and decide if that individual state is also going to reschedule or move things within their scheduling. So what the heck is going to happen in states where we have recreational? What's going to happen in states where we have medical? We have absolutely no clue. But what I do know,
Pandora's box.
yeah, exactly. And what I do know is that moving it into Schedule 3 qualifies it for use as an active ingredient in a pharmaceutical, meaning that within easily a period of a few years, depending on how fast someone could expedite research and clinicals, you'll be able to go to a CVS or Walgreens and pick up cannabis as a Schedule 3 prescription. Now, why do I say some people in the industry are lauding that when they shouldn't be? Well, it moves it out. Certainly, it moves it out of the purview of the DEA and the Department of Justice. It takes it out of IRS 280E. But you're now a pharmaceutical company. You have to comply with pharmaceutical licensing and regulations for production of that substance. You got to get in with Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance, figure that stuff out. Most mom and pop cannabis companies are not going to be able to do that whatsoever. And I think we will lose a lot of that. Well, I shouldn't say lose. We may return to a lot of black market, like we've seen happen in certain states. But I'm not sure rescheduling is it good?
Right.
Yes. Is it what people think it will be? I don't think
Right.
so.
No, it's like sorry to cut you off, Quentin. It's not like it's like a step, right? It's a baby step, because ultimately, like I don't know if this is even a possibility, but like at the end of the day, it's a plant that should be alcohol is not part of the FDA, as far as I understand, right? Alcohol is regulated and scheduled completely differently. If anything, like the model, in my opinion, and you brought up TABC for the state level, and another gentleman we've spoken to in the space also brings this up. But like, look at the way alcohol is regulated. If you're looking for a model, or like, how do you legalize cannabis nationally? Regulated the way alcohol is regulated, and then you have a model and a system that works. I know law enforcement has some pushback on that, because it's how do you field sobriety tests and all this enforcement becomes a whole nother thing. But yeah, I mean, I know there's just so many different angles of this, but yeah, Schedule 3, obviously, like you said, it becomes a pharmacy product now, and then not a whole lot of trust in the pharmacy world and pharmacy industry these days. So like, that's a whole nother bag of worms. But.
Yeah, and I mean, and some of my background, I used to work in the compounding pharmacy world. Those of you or those listening who are currently in the cannabis manufacturing world, if you're wanting schedulization like that, you should look into CGMP standards that the FDA puts out, and you should look at what a lot of these pharmacies have to go through in order to sell their products. I'm not going to give a declaration on whether or not that's good or bad, but the only thing that I can say is that it's going to cost a lot more money. Through third-party testing, through building a facility that is up to those standards, that's going to be tough. The FDA does not play around with that stuff because what they can do is they can go back to the pediatrician who had to intubate a child, and they can go back and say, well, we've also had these issues, and they will win that 100%.
It drives me that argument, and I get it. Like, I have children, and I understand. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss the fact that children are getting hurt. Like you said, it's in the thousands. That surprised me a little bit. I didn't realize it was that high. But anytime somebody brings that up to me, I'm just like, all right, let's talk about how many people die every year because of alcohol. How many children die because of alcohol-related car accidents? How many children die because of abusive alcoholic parents? So like that to me, like I just can't stand that argument because we already accept it in society. We already accept it when it comes to alcohol. We've learned what happened when you prohibit it.
Shootings.
Yeah, so it's just like that to me is just such a like that argument just doesn't hold water to me because we have that conversation around alcohol and it's like, well, we seem to manage to figure it out. And as a society as a whole, we've come to accept that we want to have our beer when we watch football. We want to have our whiskey to load off, whatever. And we say we know that comes with a societal cost of X amount of alcohol-related deaths per year, whether it's through disease, accidents, abuse, et cetera, et cetera. But direct evidence is there that shows how dangerous alcohol is, and we can accept that. And cannabis, although the studies aren't there because it's been hidden in a closet for decades, but the same studies are done, and the amount of deaths from cannabis-related incidents are going to be so much lower. So like I said I wasn't going to proselytize.
It'd be quite negligible.
I'm proselytizing. I said I wouldn't, but like that right there, that argument just really gets under my skin.
You made the argument for regulations instead of a ban. And I actually highly agree with moving, particularly for THC beverages, moving them within traditional alcoholic beverage streams. I mean, we can't hide the ball here as an industry. There are people who like to pretend the plant is an end-all be-all. I think more reasonable minds prevail when they say, like, on the medical side, does it have adjunctive potential for certain conditions, and can it be used palliatively? Absolutely. Is it for everyone? Absolutely not. Same thing on the hemp side. Just like alcohol, there are people who choose not to drink. There are people who would choose to imbibe a hemp-derived D9. We need to give them that option, but we do need to take it away from, and it's a little bit of hypocrisy on the state's position to me, because our regulatory agency hasn't done much regulating, and our regulations are, you could legally sell a 500 milligram, let's just Stonio, I've seen those knockoff Oreos, to a 6-year-old within this state, within the hemp program, setting aside like legality of a 6-year-old to contract and things like that. But we have zero restrictions on that. We should absolutely have 21 and up age restrictions on highly intoxicating products. We should have child resistant packaging mechanisms, because this is where I get pushback from the alcohol industry, or usually people in hemp beverage who say, well, the alcohol industry doesn't have to do that. The first time I say child resistant or tamper packaging, well, 98% of alcoholic products that are on the shelf, if my 3-year-old went in there to chug a fifth of vodka, he's spitting it right out. He's not going to drink that. Do I have hemp beverages sitting in this house that taste like juice? Yes, absolutely. And so I, as a parent, am very cognizant of that. Keep them much higher. When he's, a little bit more functioning, I'll be able to tell him about the cannabis symbol and stuff. But do I, as a parent, want to see child-resistant packaging on hemp beverages? You bet your ass I do. And I practice what I preach. I am part of a hemp beverage company. We worked profusely and at elevated costs to get actual tamper and child-resistant caps onto the bottle. So those are standards I think that the industry should start self-imposing, and most people I find already do. Obviously on the can side it's a little different. How in the world do you make a child resistant can? There's the OXO topper, but you never want to send an entire industry to one company. Well, then have some supply shortage issues and things like that. But it's the counter I always make, because people will say, well, alcohol doesn't have to do it, and I'm like, I couldn't drink a straight full cup of vodka, but can I drink a straight full drink of 200 plus beverages out there in a heartbeat? And so would my child. So most of this I think is also on parental responsibility. Like, don't leave
100%.
these don't leave it sitting out for your child in the first place. Like, are children crafty? Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? If you come to my house, any hemp derivative products, I have a safe with a lock, biometric lock
Which
on it.
Which again, like going back to like you brought up gun safety, but you go to Dan Patrick and tell him we need to start regulating guns and restricting access to guns because children are dying because their parents are leaving their guns out on the coffee table, which is the same instance of what's leading to these children getting hurt. It's parent responsibility. Same argument, different product, and Dan Patrick's going to have two different points of view about what to do about it. So, again, I'm going to try to temper back from that.
Point loudly heard.
Yeah, but no, it is. It's very interesting. We have, like I said, we have so many. Ever since I first started here at SNEED, when we got this company going back in 2018, I was, again, that was when the hemp bill was just signed, the second one, and I was just blown away at how many CBD companies we had calling in, and I was like, wow, like how far we've come since I was in high school. This is just But I mean, it's growth is not linear. I use this phrase a lot lately, both on a personal level, professional level, and the same thing for this industry. So there's going to be some setbacks. Looks like 2025 might be a hard year, but over time, I think, like you said, the voice of the people will eventually be heard, and it gets louder and stronger. And eventually, Dan Patrick, thankfully, can't be lieutenant governor forever. So hopefully, at some point, we'll get some more logic into. But that's great discussion so far. I don't know if you have any more questions or wrap up or anything, Quentin.
I get. I just cannabidiol. This isn't in, or I can rephrase the question. Cannabidiol. Like I said, I was in compounding pharmacy world, and I remember in Texas we launched it and then quickly pulled it back. What happened there? Is that a question worth bringing up in this discussion at all, or?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, our statute specifically mentions cannabidiol because at that time when it was passed, it was signed June 10th, 2019, so it was in pre-drafting in late 2018, same time as around the passage of the Farm Bill. If you'll recall, that's what the entire industry was at that point. It was topical CBD.
Yeah.
People were scared to introduce an oral CBD tincture. Then it went from topical CBD to ingestible CBD. Then we had Delta 8 had a heyday. Then we went through the heyday of high synthetics with THCO and HHC. And now we kind of level off where THCA is the new thing. And that's one of the most fascinating things about my job is because I'm like, what is it going to be next year? So part of the difficulty when I work with state legislatures is they always want you to define intoxicating when it comes to cannabinoids. And I'm like, it's almost an impossible task because CBD may be intoxicating to some individuals.
I was like, it's like how does the Supreme Court define pornography?
You know
what you see, yeah. But unfortunately, when I'm looking at a senator, I can't be like, well, you know what? I'll just write in the bill. You know it when you see it. Like,
yeah.
So then, I guess my last question is then, I mean, how do we shift the discussion here in Texas? How do we shift it from outright ban? How do we how do we push towards more common sense regulation? And how do we message that the best way?
I think to save hemp in this session, people have to understand, because this is an requisite understanding that our senators at, we have to expand medical. Are there permissible uses for hemp that should stay? Absolutely. But if we get rid of hemp and we don't expand medical, we're dead in the water here in Texas. Our dispensing organizations, they won't make it another 2 years to wait on session. So at that point, we have absolutely nothing. So my best case scenario is I'm a big fan of an omnibus bill to fix it all. Expand medical, put reasonable regulations on hemp, move THC beverage over to TABC. But in most of the conversations, because of the lieutenant governor's directive, it's, well, we're not doing anything with anything else until we ban hemp. And so what can people do? If you are a company that has the funds to hire a lobbyist, absolutely do so. Don't run out willy-nilly and hire somebody from out of the state. I would be so happy to recommend a competent and qualified lobbyist to you here in the state of Texas who actually knows what they're doing.
If they wanted to, could they just email you for a referral?
Yeah, just shoot me an email and say, hey, we're looking for a lobbyist, because just like every other state, connections matter here. Like if you come tell me, hey, I hired a Democratic huge DC bigwig, I'm going to laugh in your face and say, congratulations on wasting your money. Because who you needed to hire was the staunch Republican who was the chief of staff for Abbott for 7 years, who has the connections to get you in there, yada, yada. So,
Right.
yes, I'd be more than happy to do that. As I stated, the House is going to be where the fight is this session. I would not waste your time. So many people are like, well, I'm going to go meet with Senator Perry. We'll meet with Senator Hughes. I'm going to meet with them. Well, wasting your time. Yes, they'll be cordial and listen to you, but they have their marching orders from Lieutenant Governor and are following them to a T. So the better and more prudent use of your time is to find out who your individual state representatives are and then speak to them about preserving industry here through imposition of reasonable regulations, 21 and up, child resistant tamper-proof packaging, packaging that's not attractive to children, not more stringent testing mechanisms, but mechanisms for our agency to actually validate some of these tests. Put a little bit more teeth into enforcement. Right now, it's like a three letters and you're still not out regime, and we're processing retail licenses at a really rapid rate. I think we're up to nearly 10,000 retail licenses at this point, which obviously the Lieutenant Governor is not happy about that. it I- it's sad to me because the people who are doing what they're doing, the people who are doing what they should be doing, are the ones most impacted by the small percentage out there who are these guys like y'all are in Houston. I'm sure you've seen y'all have so many people there saying, "Get your medical marijuana card here, medical marijuana dispensary." Like how they've not been sued for false or fraudulent advertising, absolutely beyond me. Because there are actually consumers who go into these places believing, yeah, this is medical marijuana here in Texas. Um, so those guys and the ones who if you watch the May hearing, someone testified there was a Delta 8 vending machine across the street from a middle school with no age verification and high potency vapes in there. Like we have a vaping statute that requires 21 and up for vape sales here. So it's like who is out there doing these things. Go after those guys, because I feel for those in the industry who are following regulations, who are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And instead, the conversation is getting so micro focused on these people who, frankly, I think are in it for the overnight, make a quick buck and move on to the next industry kind of thing.
Absolutely. This has been a great conversation. I could keep talking to you for much longer, Chelsea. I really we all appreciate your time. We'll have this go up in January or first week of February on the calendar. I want it to stay fresh because I know everything is always changing. So who knows what Dan Patrick might say in the next 30 days. But yeah, thank you for your time. Yeah. We appreciate it. For those of you listening out there, I'm just going to do a quick outro, Chelsea. We don't necessarily have to end the call here, but like, subscribe, the buttons down below, comment, share, and give us your feedback. If there's any topics you folks want to hear us or guests you think you'd like to have us come on, Chelsea's email address will be here. Quentin, you'll do that in post. So if you are looking for a lobbyist or a lobbying firm here in Texas to help you out and spread the word, Chelsea said she will be happy to make a referral for you folks. So tune in. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you.